ready for the interview today. Welcome back, Karina. Welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you for having me back.
I was cramming for finals today, and the first thing I looked up was where to get Narcan, and it took me I just Googled it, and it took me directly to GoodRx, and GoodRx gave the prices. And I think the best price was $3.50 for a 2-pack at Albertsons, what have you. But all the usual suspects were in there, CVS and Walgreens and whatnot. But there was also a lot of answers that said, if you'll just ask drugstores, county health department, city health department, state health department, you probably get them free. So it kind of put me in mind of COVID tests. It's like, well, if you just walk up and pull out your card, they're going to charge you $20-$30. But if you'll do a little homework and ask, you can probably get it free. So before we get into nuts and bolts of Narcan and fentanyl overdose, are people getting it from drugstores? Where are they getting Narcan?
I don't think so. I think most of it's from public health office, stuff like that, Department of Health.
I run a community center in Santa Fe. By the way, we're in well over 100 cities now.
Awesome.
So I no longer assume that somebody can drive to the address I give them because they might be in London and they might be in Miami, which is great. Love hearing from people that are listening in other cities. So thank you for the support. But let's just limit it to the United States. Everybody's got a city health department and a county health department and a state health department. Go on their website and start looking around for Narcan supplies. Is that what's up?
Probably, or call your local shelter. They could probably direct you.
Okay. Yeah. Karina's third time appearance on the show runs a large homeless shelter in Santa Fe. And the fentanyl thing, when did you first start hearing about fentanyl? What's going on with that?
It was some years ago, but what I was watching on YouTube there's certain shows, podcasts and stuff that I was watching that was talking about fentanyl and carfentanil.
What was the second thing you said?
Carfentanil? It's another synthetic type of fentanyl.
Okay. All right.
And that they were, I want to say it was like 3 or 4 years ago. And usually it hits, I think, larger cities first and then starts making its way to the center of the country. And so we knew we were going to see it eventually. Now, that being said, I don't think anybody was prepared for how bad it was going to be, or it is. So, but I have to say really quick.
Yeah. When
you first started, you were like, oh, I Googled how to, and for a second, I thought you were going to say I Googled where to find fentanyl. Oh. And I was like, well, that's interesting. But thank goodness you said Narcan. So.
I am working the other side of the street. And I also, why did I look this up? Maybe something led me, the rabbit trail. You got to help you if you ever look at your own search history. You're like, yeah, I was watching a scene from Glee. I don't know what to tell you on that one. I was in a fugue state. Okay. What I'm trying to spit out is I saw marijuana laced with fentanyl is now police departments are on the lookout and stuff. Do you think that's worth worrying about, or is that a scare tactic? Somebody like razor blades and apples on Halloween?
Yeah, I would equate it to that. Okay. I don't think it's, especially like here in New Mexico and a lot of states, it's legal. So you're getting, I guess if you're really buying your weed off the street, it could happen, but I don't think it's an actual thing. I think it's more an urban myth.
Okay.
It probably did happen in one instance with somebody, and it's usually your friend like messing with you or somebody. I don't think people are like, oh, I'm going to sell weed and then just lace it with fentanyl. So yeah, no, in my opinion, it's urban myth.
Gotcha. Thanks. But it does, you deal with fentanyl overdoses in your line of work, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, we do. I mean, it's part of the work. It's usually not, a lot of people think that it's happening a lot is for us, like in the shelter, and that's actually not. It's usually around the area.
Sure.
Outside our gates or across the street, this and that. Usually we're the first point of contact because the guests people know that we have Narcan and that staff can respond. So we're the first go-to. People aren't calling 911. They're running to the shelter and it's like, hey, we need you. And then we're calling 911.
I probably got ahead of myself with fentanyl because it's any opioid, and there's a lot of opioid use and addiction in this country and overdose and dangerous, not just the one drug fentanyl.
No, that would be accurate. I think it's just the pills right now, the illicit ones, the fake press pills have flooded the streets and really... The harder part is for like the younger population is they're taking it assuming it's like oxycodone or Oxycontin, and it's not. It's not meant to actually be consumed as a pill. And that's where you're seeing accidental overdoses where, if somebody took an Oxycontin, they're not necessarily going to overdose unless it's a really potent one, because Oxycontin's like a regular prescribed opiate, right? But if you're taking a fentanyl pill that you think is Oxycontin, oxycodone, something like that, yeah, I think that's happening with the younger population. The younger kids are like, oh, pills.
Okay, so...
Sorry, that was a lot.
No. So I think what I missed was you're distinguishing between if they do prescribe fentanyl for people with terrible cancer pain, that sort of thing. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't actually know about this stuff.
Yeah,
so
and
I'm
it was
asking.
actually originally used in, I think, even surgeries because really potent, but, it wears off really quickly. And that's the thing with the street fentanyl, same thing. It's really potent, but it wears off.
You mean like in a couple hours you're...
especially if you build up a tolerance, you're going to need more.
Okay. So if I'm being treated for terrible, terrible pain and I've got a legitimate, appropriate prescription for fentanyl, and in my other hand, I've got something I bought behind the 7-Eleven that looks the same. Obviously, we have no way of really know what the bathtub gin version of it is, but is it probably really stronger? Is it dirtier? What?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. When people talk about fentanyl, they're talking about the illicit version, not the pharmaceutical grade, where there's checks and balances, quality control, and like you said, the bathtub version is like whatever they've mixed in it as additives to press the pill, and they even stamp the pills with it kind of looks like the logo for OxyContin.
Okay. And so. We've had to give it out here in my community center a handful of times over the course of a year. Do you track the same kind of numbers, or is it? Yeah,
I mean, it has changed. Granted, for us, part of the shelters we were discouraging from people camping and loitering around the shelter. And part of the issue there when we did that is, people overdosing elsewhere, right? Instead of just around the shelter where they can come and grab a staff so there for a while, I was very specifically tracking it. We were averaging one overdose reversal a month in a span of a year, right? That has since changed. And for me, part of that is that protocol of not having people camping around the shelter or loitering around the shelter and acknowledging that they're probably using elsewhere. And if they OD, there's nobody there to respond.
So they're 2 miles away in a city park and they've overdosed. Do they end up on your doorstep some kind of way? Is that what you're saying? Or you never hear about that person?
No, sometimes we hear, especially if it's somebody familiar with the community, the homeless community, be like, oh, so-and-so overdosed. We did have somebody overdose, and it was really hard with the staff because by the time we got there, we couldn't reverse it. So it was like a couple blocks down. So by the time somebody came to us and let us know, we tried to administer the reversal, and then the paramedics arrived. They also tried, and at that point, it was too late.
Okay. So do you have people walking in going, I took too much, or I smoked? Or they're smoking it off foil, you told me.
Yeah, interestingly. Yeah, a lot of it is well, it's meant to be smoked off oil. I think that's how it's now being produced, right, to be smoked. Again, if you're a kid who doesn't know and you're just wanting to experiment or whatever, that's why you're seeing overdoses in young people who are actually ingesting it. It's not meant to be ingested. You smoke it off a piece of foil.
The bathtub version is built to be crushed and smoked.
Yeah, they don't even crush it. You get a strip of foil, they put the pill, and then, they light it underneath, and then usually they have a straw or a pen or something, and then they use that to inhale the smoke.
And so how do you know somebody has overdosed? Do their friends tell you, or
well, if they're with somebody at the shelter, usually somebody's running and saying, "Hey, so and so's not responding." Usually they know. They're like, "Oh, they're overdosing." Sometimes there is that fear of like the police or criminal consequences. They'll be like, "Oh, they're something's wrong. They're not responding."
Are they always out like a light, or are they sometimes semi-lucid but feeling
typically
normal?
When we get called, they're out.
Okay.
And usually the fingertips, the tip of the nose, the lips start to turn blue.
Holy, okay.
Because it suppresses the respiratory system. So people get so relaxed with the opiate that they stop breathing. It suppresses the respiratory system. So a lot of times they just kind of, you hear about people nodding out. Well, a lot of that will be they stop breathing.
Right. And the pupils are pinned. Is that?
It just with any other opiate, the pupils get pinpoint or it tightens. And when people are withdrawing, it does the opposite. Their eyes start to dilate when they're going through withdrawal.
All right. Time to talk about the solution or the Band-Aid, which is Narcan.
Narcan
to me, the solution is getting sober and
saving lives.
Not getting high. Okay.
It's not even a Band-Aid. It's just saving a life. It's the modern day Heimlich maneuver.
I meant treating the symptoms. That's the only thing I meant by that.
Okay, gotcha.
So if you've never seen, which I hadn't until we had a fellow from the State Department come in and do a training here at the community center, it's not much more complicated than Afrin. It's a little, you can see a picture of it online. It's a little gadget that's a one-shot nasal spray. You wait until you put the person on their back, put it pretty far up their nose, like a half an inch or so, and squeeze it. It's a one-shot deal. You throw it in the garbage after the one dose, and hopefully you've got more available if something goes, if you miss or it falls out or they need more than one. You're supposed to give it a couple of minutes and try again. Yeah. But it's very benign. You can do it on kids. It doesn't.
Yeah. If you're not overdosing, it's not going to do anything to you. It's like somebody squirting water up your nose.
Right. Okay. So the Good Samaritan law applies if you're nervous about, I don't want to stop and try to help this. Do you have some in your car? Do you carry it with you as like a fire extinguisher?
Yes, exactly. All yeah, because you never know when you're going to need it. And it's always better to, err on the side of caution. If somebody's down, you don't know what they've taken. Typically, it's my understanding that there's not any side effects or it's not going to like contraindicate with other medications or anything. You can just administer it. Obviously, if it's not an overdose or at least an opiate overdose, it's the person's still not going to respond.
So you see the earmarks of overdose. You give them a. Have you seen it in use, like personally?
Oh yeah,
right
I've administered it. Yeah.
What was it like? What'd you do? How'd
it's
it go?
Scary. The scarier part is seeing somebody blue and unresponsive. That part is what's really scary, and then just trying to encourage them to take a breath. And, we administer it, give it a few minutes. Usually you're doing what's called a sternal rub, where you're like trying to evoke that response of taking a breath. So we'll do that, you flutter the eyelashes, just usually what you and I will be like, take a breath with, and hoping, I've seen people pat on the back too of like, again, just trying to evoke that taking a breath response.
Just get them to come around.
Yeah. So you give it a few minutes. I will say with fentanyl, we've had to administer more than one dose of Narcan.
You administer the first blast and then call 911? Get an ambulance there?
We're doing it simultaneously. The moment somebody tells us somebody's not outside needing medical attention, we're calling 911.
Gotcha. Okay. And again, urban myth, did it come up swinging? I've heard people come up, it's like waking up a rattlesnake. Okay.
Had somebody wake up swinging.
Okay.
I've heard it's happened. I've never seen it happen. Usually the person's really groggy, confused. The other end of that, and I let my staff know and volunteers know, is like, very rarely do you like, oh, you saved my life. Oh, thank you so much. It's like, a lot of times it's like, thanks, you just ruined my hat. Like, wow. So you have to go into it knowing like, probably the person's overdosed before. It's in my field, it's very rarely like a first instance. There was one woman who just, I think when she came to and realized what happened, she did freak out, but not violently. It was like just sobbing uncontrollably of like, oh, I almost died. But I've never had anybody come up swinging or anything like that.
Well, I was watching a documentary called Pulp Fiction where John Travolta and Eric Stoltz had a needle about 3 feet long and they drew a dot on her. Wait a second.
I mean, it's a great scene for film.
Okay. Man, and she came up swinging. All
yeah.
Right.
Well, and that was adrenaline, wasn't it?
Oh, you're right.
Yeah. I love that documentary.
With your luck, this is going to be the teaser for the podcast for an incredibly serious,
right?
Nay, tragic topic. We're goofing on.
Well, I was watching the show too, and the same thing. They're administering Narcan like you shoot, just put it in the leg like through a syringe, and I was like, nobody uses that anymore. Like, that paramedics do have Narcan in syringes and stuff, but everyday people do not. You have Narcan, and I wish. I get it. It's a show. They don't want to totally go into reality, I guess, but I think because a lot of people end up educated from what they watch on TV, of going like, if we're going to do this, let's make it look real. I've seen fake overdoses on TV shows, and I'm like, it's nothing like that. Like, people are going to expect that.
This came up in the making of Breaking Bad. I'm in the film business here in northern New Mexico, and that was, a huge, very important show. And how many 10 seasons of them cooking up meth, and they're like, yeah, we don't want to be total Hollywood BS, but we don't really want to be an instruction manual on
that. It's a fine line, right? But for me, I'm like, if it's an overdose, if it's administering Narcan, let's try to make, at least so people are like, oh, that's what it looks like, right? Not the Pulp Fiction documentary version of like popping up or swinging. That might make people afraid to respond.
Did you tell me, or did you hear the same thing I heard about Prince, the artist? The musical artist.
He overdosed?
He overdosed. This is what I heard. That he went to the hospital, they treated him with Narcan, and he seemed okay, and he went home, and he had so much in his system that it re-overdosed. When the benefits wore off, he had so much in his, and what was he, 5'1" or something, right?
Yeah.
Had that much in his system. That it was They didn't go the distance with taking care of him, sent him home, and he died without using again.
That's a thing.
Accurate? Okay.
That's why we always try to encourage people, like when we do an overdose reversal, of going to the hospital, going with the EMTs. Ultimately, they can decline. But for me, it's like, please go, because it can, if you've used enough, it can still, the Narcan will wear off and the opiates will still be there. And yeah, people have died from being administered Narcan, refusing medical attention, or even being discharged from a hospital too soon. And the use, it's still very present in the system and can still cause overdose death.
If my aunt is living with me and she's on OxyContin or something, should I keep this stuff around just in case, or is that... Is that
an ethical question or some advice?
No,
I'm just kidding.
I'm just saying, if they're using legitimately, opioids, should they have Narcan around just in case
absolutely. There for a while they were encouraging, and I think the emergency department here was also dispensing Narcan with prescription opiates. So if they'd write a prescription for opiates, they'd write one for Narcan as well. I'm
all for taking the the onus off of it, the bad, the idea of having Narcan be a dirty word. It's like a fire extinguisher. Keep it around in case it's needed. No?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
At worst case scenario, it sits in your shelf forever and you never need to use it. And that's a wonderful thing. But yeah, I encourage more people to get it. Like just like you would have an emergency kit in your car, Band-Aids or, whatever you have an emergency kit, first aid kit.
Yeah.
I think it'd be wonderful to have that in there. I mean, it won't harm you. You administer it. If it brings a person back, amazing. If that's not the cause of the medical emergency, then no harm, no foul. And moving on till the paramedics get there,
So the numbers are terrible in New Mexico right now with fentanyl overdose deaths have skyrocketed. Is that usually one ingredient in a bigger picture, like somebody's super drunk and also gets high on fentanyl, and or they're ill and weakened in that way? What's accounting for these huge numbers of overdose deaths in the state?
I think the potency and the lack of regulation of how much you're actually taking in, and I think, a lot of times the highest overdoses are happening with people who are coming out of recovery or in recovery relapse.
That old thing about heroin, you're used to taking a lot and then you get clean for a while and you go back to your old
Yeah, because your body gets used to not having that flood of dopamine and then you start using it again. And yeah, the other thing is like mixing your drugs. It's always like trying to educate people because it does suppress the respiratory system. So does alcohol. So do benzodiazepines. So if you're mixing those, there is a good chance you could overdose.
Right. Oh, boy. Well, thank you for fighting the good fight. And
thank you for having me on here.
To educate. You're always welcome back. And you're a real blessing here in the community. We need more people like you doing what you do. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.